So for these, keep in mind that it's right now broken down into 3 steps. For each of these parts, you want to have something written. You want to define a variable, you want to write and solve an equation, and at the end write a sentence explaining it. So we're not just, once again, as you've caught on in the algebra, you're not just, well, let me get the answer. And if I can get the answer without showing work, then I don't show work. You want to get rid of all that and say kind of the opposite. No matter what, you're always going to show work, even if you don't need to, so you can prove it to someone maybe that did not know how to do it. I like to solve these word problems just by drawing a little picture first, kind of starting off. It's called like a bar approach or a bar method, which basically means we have something that's a whole. Like in this case, it's like 350 miles away. That's the whole piece. We know that we're driving 350 miles away, which if you're going about 75 miles an hour is around 4 or 4.5 hours of driving. So we know the whole trip is 350, right? But we know Hector has already driven 90 miles. So a little piece of that 350 is 90 miles. And then we're trying to figure out how many more miles is this. And by writing it this way, you can kind of see that, oh yeah, the 90 miles plus however many miles this is should add up to this total piece. So I write the pieces at the top and then the total at the bottom, and I know that this plus this should add up to this. And that's one way of approaching it and just seeing it. Okay. Before we do that, let's actually define the variable. You notice I used m. I just picked m because we're trying to find out miles. So say m, but you also say, what does m stand for? Not just, well, I picked m. M stands for, and you can almost do this verbatim, how many more miles needs to reach cousin's home. So you can just say how many miles to reach cousins. You don't have to be creative with it. You don't have to come up with a different way of saying it. I just like using exact words. That makes it very safe. You don't have to worry about having too much or too little if you use the exact words. And as I mentioned before, because we're writing like this, we can kind of see that, oh yeah, the 90 plus however amount this is, and miles here, 90 plus m, should equal or add up to the 350, because it's the same distance. Should add up to 350. And then we can go ahead and solve that just by subtracting 90 on both sides. So 350 minus 90 is 260. Right. And the last step, of course, is to explain, well, what does 260 mean? Now, your part 1 and your part 3 will often be repetitive. So if we're trying to find at the beginning how many miles to reach the cousins, well, that's our answer. Okay, it's 260 miles to reach the cousins. You know, you can use the same word, same over and over. Okay, it's 260 miles to reach his cousin's house. Okay. Proper capitalization, spelling, punctuation is expected. We're not going to say, well, this is math, so therefore you don't have to spell anything correctly. Imagine if you went to a bank and everything they gave you was not spelled correctly. But this is a bank, it's money, we count. We shouldn't have to do English right. Like, no, you have to do English correctly all the time and everything, not just when you're in English class. Okay? Alright, so that's one example. I'll do one more and I'll leave you for 3. And this is kind of broken into 2 parts of problems. So 1 through 3 are basically the same, and then the rest of them, 4 through I think 7, are more or less the same. All right. So Tamai wants to raise $175 for a school fundraiser, and she raises $120 so far. How much more does she need to reach the goal? So before you go too far, you can kind of look at these and realize it's the same question being asked a different way. We need to get to a certain amount, 175 here. Here was a 350. We had to drive 350 miles. And they gave us the amount we've gone so far. So far we've raised 120, or so far we've driven 90 miles. It's basically the same question being asked a different way. If you can catch on to those similarities, it doesn't feel like you're doing, okay, how do you do number 2? Well, how do you number 3? Because now it's different. It's really the same question worded differently. So the setup, like right here, is going to be similar. Right? So we have a total amount we're trying to raise, $175. That's the total amount from here to here. Okay. We know that we've raised already 120. And we're trying to figure out how much more, and since we're raising how much more money, I'm going to say D for dollars. You can use any variable, but I'm going to say, yeah, 120 plus how many more dollars will be 175. So my D is dollars to raise. Right. My equation is going to look very similar. Here was 90 plus M equals 350. Based upon the picture. So it's going to be the same idea here. 120 plus D is 175. And I know this seems maybe simplistic for some of you. It's okay. It's more about understanding that there's 3 steps that we want you to follow, and make sure you show all those 3 steps. It's not about how fast you can come up with the answer at 55 and say it's 55. I got the answer. You still have to write everything out. Not optional. Ever. Okay? I find more people do poorly on this because they're just trying to finish in a big rush and they don't want to write anything down, as opposed to, well, they just didn't know how to do it. So that patience factor makes a difference. So for our sentence, we can say Tinmaya, I think it is, needs to raise $55. Good. Now 3 is similar. It's just that they want to factor in that there are 2 tickets. So there's 2 people. So it's a little bit different. I'll set up the picture, but you guys can solve. But if you read through it, it's kind of the same thing. They give us a total amount, whether it be 350 miles, $175 you're trying to raise. Here they say the total amount they spend is $19.90, which is not bad for 2 movies and frozen yogurt. So we know the total amount is $19.90. We know that $5.50 was spent on frozen yogurt. And we know that there were 2 tickets. 2 tickets because there's 2 people. So the difference here is I'm going to put 2 times T. 2T. Instead of just doing plus M or plus D, it's going to be plus 2T. And then you can go ahead and define the variable. What does T stand for? Alright, cost of 1 movie ticket. Write your equation. Same idea. The 550 plus the 2T equals the 1990. And finish your conclusion. Alright, go ahead and do that right now. And then you can check with someone next to you, see if you got something similar. Alright, so most people got $7.20. It's good. Let's go down here and read this and realize that it's something different. It's not quite the same. Go ahead and read that to yourself. 2 companies. That's different to start off right away. One's offering starting salary of $28,000 with a raise of $3,000 each year. Other company offers a starting salary of $36,000 with a $2,000 raise each year. And how many years would it take Janie's salary to be the same with both companies? And what would that salary be? Okay. So notice how there's two questions here. Two questions that we have to answer. So here's what it looks like. We have two situations or two companies that are the same. Okay. I'm going to say company 1, company 2. All right. One of them is going to give let's see here, $28,000 to start a year. Okay. And then it's going to go up by $3,000 every year. Now I'm going to call that 3,000 Y. Y is for years. But this way, if I add these together, after 0 years, or the very beginning, it'll be 3,000 times 0, which is 0, plus 28,000, that's what you start at. But after 1 year, it'll be 3,000 times 1, and 3,000 plus 28,000 will be 31,000. After 2 years, it'll be 3,000 times 2, 6,000. 6,000 plus 28,000, 34,000. So that way it goes up by 3,000 every year by making it 3,000 Y. And I'll do the same thing here, only this one, company 2, is going to start at 36,000. Alright, starts with more money. I'll make it a little bit longer, but only goes up by $2,000 each year. So clearly, if just starting off, company 2 is better because it just has more money. But at some point, company 1, since they get bigger raises, is going to start making more money. They're trying to figure out, well, how many years will it take to start making more money at company 1? Right? So if you're going to only work for 5 years, what company should you work at? If you're going to work for 15 years, what company should you work at to make more money? Right? It's a good question, and when you guys start job hunting, you're going to have, or career hunting, you're going to have these questions to ask, like, well, this starts less money, but it could grow a lot faster, or this one already makes a lot more money, but I won't get as big of a raise. So depending on your situation, either one might be a good deal for you. So Y is going to be how many years? Years till, years until salary is the same, or same salary. There you go. Salary is the same. And we still have the same situation. The top two pieces, they add up and equal the bottom two pieces. It's just that we have variables on the top and bottom, so we're going to have variables on both sides. So we have 28,000 plus the $3,000 per year. When is that the same as the 36,000 plus the $2,000 raise a year? Right? And you can see that you have variables on both sides. Now, we spent a whole week last week solving all of these. We didn't really stop and say, you know, well, here's where you really use it. You might have thought about it, but it's with math, you kind of have to learn the skill and then learn how to use it. Okay? So here, and along with every single equation you solved last week, there is an actual real-life purpose for it. You just have to wait a little while to figure out, well, what is that purpose? It's there. We're not solving these equations for nothing. Very particular reason why we're choosing to solve these type of equations. Alright, so I'm going to solve this by subtracting 28,000 on both sides. I'm trying to avoid negatives. Okay? So if I subtract 28,000 from 36,000, that'll keep it positive. And as long as I have variables on one side and the numbers on the other, I'll be okay. So I'm going to subtract 2,000 Y on both sides. That cancels the variables out on the right, numbers out on the left. I have 3,000 minus 2,000, which is 1,000. And 36 minus 28, which is 8,000. And dividing both sides by 1,000. 8,000 divided by 1,000 is 8. So Y equals 8. What does 8 stand for? Yeah, back up top, right? Years till they have the same salary. So it will take 8 years both companies to have the same salary. Now, what we're trying to avoid by having this last sentence is not just saying, oh, it's 8. Well, it's 8 what? 8 years. 8 years for what? 8 years for, knowing what your answer means is probably more important than actually getting the answer. So if you got somebody that has an answer, but they're like, well, I don't know what it means, it's just an answer, it's not really valuable. 8 years for both companies to have the same salary. All right, both companies have the same salary. All right, is that it? Have we answered all the questions? No. Remember, this one is a little different. It had this follow-up question. Well, what is that salary after 8 years? We need to know what that salary is. Which one should we use? Should we use the company 1 or company 2? Or does it matter? It doesn't matter because after 8 years, it's when they're the same. So if I plug in 8 into company 1, 8 years into company 1, or 8 years into company 2, that's when they come out to be the exact same number. So we can do either. I'm going to do both just to show. But 28,000 plus 3,000, right, years, that will equal 28,000, right, plus 3,000 times 8 years. 28,000 plus, let's see, 3 times 8 is 24, so that'd be 24,000. Okay, that equals, let's see here, 28 plus 24 will be 52,000 $1,000. And if we did the same thing with, you don't have to do both, just making a point, that if you understand what your answer means here, you already know that, okay, that's 36,000 plus 16,000, which is also 52,000. It's the same answer. It's when they're the same. So here's even another follow-up question. Where would you want to work at after 10 years? Company 1 or company 2? All right, company 1, right? They started with less. The first 8 years you won't make as much, but after 8 years, the 9th year, the 10th year, it starts making more. It's getting $1,000 more. They both start making on the 8th year. They're at 52,000. But after that, company 1 will get a $3,000 raise. They'll go to 55. Company 2 will only go to 54. And after that, they'll be, even further apart. So, very good question. Something to think about when you're looking for careers. Not only how much does it start at, but what's the raise structure look like every year. All right. Now read the next one on the back, number 5, and ask yourself, isn't that basically number 4 reworded? Right? More or less reworded. Instead of getting a salary and then a raise each year, this is, well, the company charges $800 and $16 per hour. Very similar language, very similar setup. So this is always a trick in word problems. If you're someone that says, I don't like word problems, think about this. They're all set up the same way. They're just different scenarios. But if you're looking at 7 problems, there's not 7 different ways of solving it. There's usually like 1 or 2 different types of problems, and that's it. If you catch on to that, it's really just like solving the same problem over and over. So this one's like $800 to start off with, right? And charges $16 per hour. Again, I'm using 16H. After 1 hour, it's going to be 16 plus 800. After 2 hours, it's going to be 32 plus 800, and so on. And then we have the other company, 2 companies instead of it's 2 companies, just like the last problem. This one only $7.20, but charges $21 per hour, so 21H. So very similar. Variables on both sides and how you solve everything. Okay. Go ahead and write down, what does H stand for? Okay. Hours what? Yeah, and you can just copy it down. hours will charge by both when will both companies be the same? And you don't want to copy that exactly, but use those same words. Hours will charge both companies to be the same. Anything like that. And then when you get your answer is going to be, it takes blank hours for both companies to be the same. There's nothing really different between part 1 and part 3. So there is a place for creativeness to have you know, different ways of saying it, everybody to have their own, you know, way. Other times, something like this, you kind of want to be pretty consistent. Nobody should really be saying anything different than hour stands, you know, H stands for how many hours took both companies the same. That's it. Keep it simple. Use the same words, and you don't have to worry about, is this good enough? Don't abbreviate it. Don't shorten it. Like, well, I only want to write 3 words, so I'm going to do that. That's laziness causing your grade to go down. Not because of math, but because, you know, 3 seconds of writing is too much. All right, what's the equation here? All right, if you need to, look at the other side. We had 28,000 plus 3,000 y, and we had 36,000 and 2,000 y. We came up with this equation. So can you come up with the equation in the same format? Sure. 800 and plus 16 h, and that should equal your 720 plus 21h. So very similar. I'll let you, I'll go through and solve this one, and I'll let you guys finish the last 3 that are very similar as well. Okay. So we have 800, right, plus our $16 per hour, and we have our 720 up front. Right, plus their $21 an hour. And you'll see this actually with, I mean, I've moved several times, and I see this with moving companies. They'll say, oh, it's only $19.95 to borrow the truck. Right? Only $19.95. 20 bucks to move, right? Very cheap. But then they'll charge you per mile. They'll charge you like an outlandish, you know, be like, oh yeah, plus it's like 50 cents a mile. And if you're moving like, 50 miles, that turns out into a lot of money. Right? Some other companies say, well, yeah, it costs $60 to rent our van, and it's only 10 cents a mile. Right? Much cheaper. So beware of those prices. So same thing, subtract 720 on both sides, subtract 16h on both sides. And you can go through and finish. Go through and finish that. So we have 80 equals 5h, divide both sides by 5, and the number of hours will be, let's see here. Let's see, 80 divided by 5. Need to go off to the side. You get 16 hours. So that's a lot of time for moving. So if you think it'll take less than 16 hours, what company is cheaper? If you think it'll take more than 16 hours, what company is cheaper? Are we finished? Have we answered all the questions? No. We also want to know, what is the charge? So how much is it for 16 hours? You can plug it into either one. So 800, and that's going to be plus $16 an hour for 16 hours. So 16 times 16. Got to figure that out. All right, what do you come up with? 1, we got 256. Yeah, $256. Which means that's going to equal, well, 200 to make 1,000, so that's 1,056 for moving. You can see, just to just to move, that's pretty expensive if you hire movers, right? That's why you end up doing a lot of it on your own. Okay, so of course down here, make sure you explain that. It'll take 16 hours for the two companies to be the same, and they charge $1,056. Write that out in some fashion. The more the better, as long as it's clear. Usually we see people writing too little. Alright, so I'll leave you with that to finish the last few. Alright. And then I'm going to have you hand out the review for your test. So tonight you want to do that as well. Get that review going.